Hold on tight, because what happened at a quiet rural school left the entire district in disbelief. This is the story of a humble farmer's son named Jacob, who was expelled by his school principal for being too poor and too dirty for their prestigious image. But what happened the very next day shook the school to its core. When a private helicopter thundered down onto the school football field, carrying a billionaire nobody expected to ever step foot there, people suddenly stopped laughing at Jacob. You will not believe who this billionaire really was and what he said to the principal. This story is about power, prejudice, and a twist that will have your jaw on the floor. Stay with us to the end, because when the helicopter lands, the truth explodes wide open. Jacob Turner always walked the same cracked dirt road to school. His boots were too big for his feet and caked in dry mud. His jeans were hand-me-downs from 3 older cousins and patched in both knees. Every morning before the rooster crowed, he helped his father on their small family farm. They had 5 cows, 2 goats, and a dozen chickens. Then Jacob rushed to catch the bus from the edge of their soybean field. That morning felt different. The sky was grey and heavy, clouds sat low on the hills. Inside his backpack were worn-out books and a soggy sandwich wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, but Jacob still smiled. He had a math quiz and he was ready for it. Numbers were the one place he felt safe. They made sense, unlike people. At Pinehill Academy, things were different. Most kids arrived in polished SUVs or sleek sedans. They wore new shoes and smelled like cologne or fruity body spray. Jacob arrived like a dusty echo from another world. When he stepped off the bus, kids covered their noses. Some laughed, some whispered. But today, even the teachers looked at him sideways. Miss Danielle, his favorite teacher, smiled faintly and gave him a nod. But even she looked nervous. After first period, the announcement came over the intercom. Jacob Turner to the principal's office, right away. His classmates made faces. One boy mouthed the word finally. Jacob's heart thumped hard in his chest. He had never been in real trouble before. Principal Leonard Carter was a man who wore his belt too high and his temper too low. His office smelled like leather and old coffee. His desk was polished, his shoes shined. He didn't look up when Jacob entered. "Was it?" Jacob sat. Leonard finally looked up with a sigh that felt practiced. "Jacob, I got calls from parents, complaints from teachers. You walk in here smelling like a barn. You are a distraction, a hygiene hazard. This is a private institution, and we have standards." Jacob opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat was tight. His hands shook. Principal Carter leaned forward. "I am sorry, Jacob, but you are not a fit for this environment. I am expelling you effective immediately." He handed over a manila envelope. Inside were forms and an official letter. That was it. No warning, no chance to speak. Just gone. Jacob walked out holding the envelope like it was filled with broken glass. As he exited the office, the school secretary avoided his eyes. No one said goodbye. No one asked if he was okay. Jacob kept walking, past the lockers, past the gym, past the American flag snapping in the wind. He didn't cry, but something in him cracked. That night, his father found him sitting in the barn, staring at the ground. Thomas Turner had hard hands and soft eyes. He didn't say much. He just sat beside his son for a long time. The silence in the barn was thicker than the hay. When Jacob finally spoke, his voice barely rose above a whisper. "They kicked me out because I don't belong." Thomas nodded slowly. Then he stood up, walked outside, and made one phone call. Just one. The next morning, before the sun even rose, the sky over Pinehill Academy started to roar. A helicopter was coming. And it wasn't just any helicopter. It was the beginning of something no one at that school would ever forget. Not the teachers, not the students, and definitely not Principal Leonard Carter. Because someone very powerful was about to knock on his office door. And when they did, the truth was going to hit harder than anything that ever landed on that football field. The low rumble started around 7:20 a.m. At first, students thought it was thunder. The sky had been thick with clouds all morning, but the sound kept building. It was deeper, closer, and then it happened. From the far end of the school roof, a powerful gust swept across the soccer field. Trees bent, dust flew into the air, papers lifted off benches. The sound was now unmistakable. A helicopter was landing. Students rushed to the windows. Teachers tried to keep order, but curiosity won. Even Miss Danielle stood frozen at her board, chalk in midair. Everyone turned their eyes to the field behind the gym. A black and silver chopper hovered before touching down. The rotors slowed just enough to reveal the logo on the side. Turner Global Investments. No one said a word. The side door of the helicopter opened slowly. Out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, dark sunglasses, crisp white shirt. He walked like someone who did not get stopped at security checks. Thomas Turner, Jacob's father. But not just a farmer. Thomas had built a multi-billion-dollar portfolio through years of quiet land investments, logistics partnerships, and high-level tech collaborations. He had been quiet about his wealth. He never left the farm. He never showed it off. Until today. Principal Carter heard the commotion from his office. At first, he rolled his eyes. He figured it was another overly funded parent showing off. He stood up, adjusted his tie, and headed for the hallway. When he stepped outside, the crowd had already formed. Students in hoodies, girls with cell phones, teachers whispering behind clipboards. Then he saw him. Thomas Turner was now walking straight toward him. And beside him, Jacob, wearing a plain white shirt, fresh jeans, and a look Carter had never seen on him before. Calm. Thomas stopped right in front of Carter and removed his glasses. We need to talk. Carter blinked. You can schedule a meeting, sir. I have classes to oversee. Thomas did not smile. You just expelled my son for smelling like the very life I built from the ground up. Carter looked around. Some students had their phones out. The janitor had stopped mopping. Sir, if you have concerns, I can direct you to the school board. I already did. Thomas pulled a document from his jacket. It was signed by 5 board members. Effective immediately, this institution will be under review for ethics violations, discrimination practices, and failure to accommodate low-income scholarship students. Principal Carter turned pale. Jacob stood silently beside his father. Thomas turned to the crowd. "I was born in boots too big for me. I built Turner Global while milking cows and fixing fences. And my son, Jacob, he is 10 times smarter than I was at his age. You will not silence him. You will not shame him." The crowd went still. Some clapped. A few teachers lowered their eyes. Thomas looked back at Carter. "You may run this school, but now we own it." The arrival of Thomas Turner's helicopter was more than just a spectacle. It sent shockwaves through Pinehill Academy. Teachers whispered nervously in the hallways, students exchanged wide-eyed glances, and Principal Leonard Carter's usual calm cracked under the weight of uncertainty. Jacob felt a mix of emotions. For years he had carried the quiet burden of feeling out of place. The stares, the whispered jokes, the subtle rejection from classmates, none of it made sense to him. He worked hard. He was eager to learn, but money seemed to draw invisible lines between the students, lines he was told he could never cross. Now, with his father's unexpected arrival, those lines began to blur. Whispers about Jacob's family wealth spread like wildfire, surprising many. The boy who was expelled yesterday was suddenly the son of one of the most powerful men in the state. At lunch, Jacob sat alone at his usual bench by the old oak tree. His eyes scanned the cafeteria, noting the curious stares and the cautious nods from classmates who never spoke to him before. He didn't know how to react to the sudden change in their behavior. Meanwhile, Principal Carter was in his office, calling an emergency staff meeting. His voice was low but firm as he reminded everyone of the school's rules and the need to maintain order. But inside, he was unsettled. The Turner name carried weight, and he feared what might come next. By the end of the day, rumors swirled that Thomas Turner was planning to invest heavily in the school, promising upgrades, scholarships, and new opportunities. The school board was already meeting behind closed doors, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Jacob walked home that evening feeling a strange sense of hope, but also dread. Would things really change, or was this just the beginning of a new battle he wasn't ready for? The next morning, Jacob arrived at school earlier than usual. He wanted to clear his head, to prepare for whatever was coming. His mind raced with questions. Would the principal apologize? Would the teachers treat him differently? Would his classmates still ignore him? As he walked toward the front entrance, a sleek black SUV pulled up and stopped near the school doors. Out stepped a tall man in a tailored suit. His confident stride and calm smile immediately caught everyone's attention. This was Thomas Turner, the billionaire Jacob had only heard about in stories. Jacob's heart pounded as Thomas approached him. The schoolyard fell silent. All eyes were on the two of them. Thomas knelt down to Jacob's level and smiled warmly. Jacob was surprised by how down-to-earth his father seemed. Thomas spoke gently, telling Jacob he was proud of him for standing strong despite the challenges. He promised to handle the situation at school and ensure that no one could treat him unfairly again. Later that day, Thomas met with Principal Carter. The conversation was intense but respectful. Thomas made it clear that Pinehill Academy would change and that respect and fairness would be the new rules. By the time Jacob left school that day, he was no longer the lonely farmer's son. With his father's support, he was ready to face the challenges ahead and prove that no one could decide his worth but himself. Days passed, and Pinehill Academy began to change in ways no one expected. Thomas Turner's involvement brought a fresh wave of hope to the school. New programs were announced, scholarships were offered to deserving students, and the campus itself began to receive upgrades. Teachers who once ignored Jacob now found reasons to praise his work. Fellow students who once whispered behind his back now approached him with curiosity and respect. The invisible walls that separated Jacob from the rest of the school began to crumble. Principal Leonard Carter worked hard to adapt to this new reality. He enforced stricter policies against bullying and unfair treatment. His demeanor softened, and he took the time to listen to students who had felt overlooked for years. Jacob felt the weight on his shoulders lighten. He realized that sometimes change comes from unexpected places, and that strength is not just about fighting alone, but about knowing when to accept help. At home, Thomas and Jacob talked often. Thomas shared stories about his own struggles growing up and how he had learned to overcome obstacles by believing in himself. Jacob's confidence grew each day. He no longer saw himself as just a farmer's son, but as someone capable of shaping his own future, regardless of what others thought. With the changes at Pinehill Academy in full swing, Jacob found himself growing stronger. But not everyone was happy. Some students and even a few teachers resented the new attention he was getting because of his father. One afternoon, during gym class, a group of older students cornered Jacob near the locker rooms. They taunted him about his past expulsion and tried to intimidate him. But this time, Jacob did not back down. He stood tall, looking each of them in the eye, refusing to be bullied. Word spread quickly about how Jacob had stood up for himself. This moment marked a turning point. More students began to support him openly, and even some who had been distant before now showed respect. Principal Carter also took notice and praised Jacob's courage during the next school assembly. The message was clear: bullying and unfair treatment would no longer be tolerated at Pinehill Academy. Jacob's journey was far from over, but with his father's support and his own growing confidence, he was ready to face whatever came next. As weeks passed, Jacob's confidence grew stronger. He started joining clubs and even made a few friends who saw him for who he truly was, a smart and kind boy with a bright future. One day, the school announced a big event, a community talent show. Jacob was nervous but decided to participate. He chose to perform a speech about overcoming challenges and standing tall despite obstacles. When the day arrived, the auditorium was packed. Jacob stepped onto the stage, heart pounding but voice steady. He shared his story, the struggles, the rejection, and how his father's support helped him believe in himself. The audience was silent at first, then erupted in applause. For the first time, Jacob felt fully accepted. Teachers, students, and even Principal Carter clapped with genuine pride. That night, Jacob went home feeling a new sense of belonging. He knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where he would no longer be defined by his past, but by his courage and dreams. After the talent show, Thomas Turner sat down with Jacob at their kitchen table. The warm light from the old lamp cast gentle shadows on their faces. Thomas looked at his son with pride shining in his eyes. "Jacob Thomas, you have shown more strength than many adults I know. This school, this town, even the world, it will try to knock you down again and again. But I promise you this, I will always be here to lift you up. You will never face anything alone." Jacob smiled, feeling the weight of his father's words. For the first time, he truly believed in his future. He understood that strength came from love, support, and never giving up, no matter the odds. That night, as Jacob lay in bed, he thought about the journey ahead. With his father's promise and his own determination, he was ready to face whatever the world had in store. Just as things seemed to settle, new challenges appeared. Some parents and community members complained about Thomas Turner's influence on the school. They feared change and wanted things to go back to the way they were. Rumors spread that the school might lose funding or even face closure if the board decided to push back against Thomas's plans. Principal Carter found himself caught between the old ways and the new vision. Jacob noticed the tension. At school, some teachers seemed distracted and some students were unsure how to act. The playground, once full of laughter, sometimes felt quiet and uncertain. But Jacob remembered his father's words. Change is never easy. It is messy and uncomfortable, but it is necessary. With renewed courage, Jacob began speaking up more in class, at meetings, and with friends. He wanted everyone to know that this was not just about money or power. It was about fairness, respect, and the right to belong. As the conflict grew, something unexpected happened. Students from all backgrounds began to unite. They organized meetings during lunch, shared their stories, and talked about what kind of school they wanted Pinehill Academy to be. Jacob became a quiet leader in this movement. He encouraged his classmates to support one another, to stand against bullying, and to speak out for fairness. His courage inspired others to find their voices. Parents and teachers started noticing the change too. The school board was flooded with letters and calls from people who wanted to see the school become a place of true inclusion. Even Principal Carter, once reluctant, began to support the new direction. He realized that the school needed to grow, and that growth meant embracing every student, no matter where they came from. Together, the Pinehill community was stronger than ever. They learned that unity could overcome fear and division. The school year was drawing to a close, and Pinehill Academy looked very different from when Jacob first arrived. The classrooms were brighter, the hallways buzzed with energy, and students walked with pride and confidence. Jacob had become more than just the farmer's son or the billionaire's child. He was a symbol of hope and change. The story of his journey spread beyond the school, inspiring others in the town. At the final assembly, Principal Carter gave a heartfelt speech. He thanked the students for their courage and the community for coming together. He acknowledged the mistakes of the past and promised a future built on respect and opportunity. Jacob looked out over the crowd, his heart full. He thought about all the challenges he had faced and the strength he had found inside himself. This was just the beginning. With his father by his side, Jacob was ready to face whatever came next. He knew that together they could overcome anything. The days after the final assembly were filled with promise. Pinehill Academy was no longer just a school, it was a community where every student felt valued and heard. New programs launched, scholarships grew, and students like Jacob found a place to thrive. Jacob spent more time helping others who struggled, sharing his story, and reminding them that no matter where you start, your future is what you make of it. His father, Thomas Turner, continued to support the school, but he always made sure Jacob's voice was the one leading the way. One afternoon, as the sun set over the fields near their home, Jacob and Thomas stood side by side, looking toward the future. Jacob smiled and said, "Dad, this is only the beginning. There is so much more to do." Thomas nodded, his eyes shining with pride and hope. Together, they knew that no challenge was too big and no dream was too far. The farmer's son had become a leader, a symbol of change, and a reminder that courage and love can rewrite any story.